Good afternoon to everyone. I am here with Mr. Ben Quirk from the Planet Auto YouTube channel.
Yep, here again to do one of these car videos.
Yes, indeed. You'll see the second part of this. This is part 5 of a slightly shambolic sound recording. It might be serendipitous as well, because these things often are. But the second part of this you will see on my channel, part 6. So obviously it'd be very wonderful if you could come over to Lloyd Vehicle Consulting and have a look at it. But we have been doing these, I suppose you call them podcasts, really, on and off for about a year now, haven't we?
We have. Yeah, it's amazing what comes out of the woodwork, isn't it? When you think, actually, we need to find something, because we can't go out and drive all these wonderful cars that we've been doing for the last year or so, and in our case, a bit longer than that, you have to then just think, well, what is it that's going to engage your audience? And we came up with these.
Yes, and the first couple episodes we did, which was back in, I think, March 2020, they didn't seem to get particularly high figures, but the one we did recently, which is about British Leyland and Austin Rover and MG and Rover Group and MG Rover and all this sort of thing, seems to have gone down quite well. So we've decided to make a couple more, and we will continue to do so. But we're going to be talking about Alfa Romeo today, aren't we?
We are. An Italian favourite of all of ours, including Mr. Coleman.
Yes, Mr. Coleman has 2 of them. You've only got one, though, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got my brother's 145 Cloverleaf sat in the garage.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll get on to 145 later, because this first half, we're talking about Alfa Romeo from 1980 to 2000, and that just about covers the 145, 146 right at the end. So
I was going to say, before we say that, we have to actually celebrate 100 years partnership between Zagato and Alfa Romeo. All those things like the 8C Mille Miglia.
Yeah, it's a very long-standing relationship, isn't it, that they've been doing. And it's amazing, really, Alfa Romeo, which was founded over 100 years ago now in Milan, that firm, the number of times they've almost gone under is absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're not talking so much about sort of the very old ones. We're talking about the time actually when Alfa Romeo was a company owned by the Italian state, about 1980, and this was a time when cars like the Alfa Sud were still in production. The kind of later series of the Alfa Sud was just coming in with about 81, 82, I think, the ones which to me I recognise, which is the things like the TI. With the sort of black bumpers and the kind of more modern to 1980s styling cues on them. The Sprint, of course, Alfa Sud Sprint Coupe lasted until 1989, which is extraordinary, really. And the Alfa Sud itself was a car that really didn't have the best reputation for rust, did it at all?
No, the other interesting thing is shaping-wise, it was an interesting shape for that time. It kind of almost reminded me of a slightly smaller Maestro.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. And the Maestro was really a 1970s design. You know, it languished for a long time.
Whereas things like the Giulia Sprint were far more saloon style, and they had a more of a rounded. Well, mind you, saying that the Alfa Sud was quite a rounded car as well, but it was also. It was one of those cars that was overlooked back then, wasn't it? I mean, you had other cars that people preferred to go to, but it's like now Alfa Romeo still doesn't have the recognition it deserves.
No, not really at all. And one of the reasons for that was the fact that cars like the Giulietta that was in production at the time, the Alfa 6, and those were the Alfetta. There were loads of different cars in production, and also commercial vehicles division, things like the Alfa Romeo AR8 and the AR6, and those were just rebadged Fiats or Ivecos, but they were trying to make a sort of car for everybody with their distinct flavor. And things like the old Giulia Saloon from the 60s and 70s, things like the 105 series coupe, and I've had a privilege of driving one of those. The engineering is sort of second to none, and there's no interference in that at all. There's no Fiat ownership in any of those, and so it did what it wanted to do. So the problem is that by the early 80s, a lot of these cars were looking really, really old. I mean, the Alfa should have been on sale since 72, as had the Alfetta. The Giulietta, which I'm sure in 77 was looking quite a modern design, by the sort of early 80s was looking a little bit dated. And so they needed to start replacing a lot of these cars. And the Alfa 6 wasn't selling particularly well, particularly in this country where they didn't have the best reputation, and they were very expensive. So they started to bring in some new cars with sort of existing technology. The Alfa Sid was built in a brand new factory by people who hadn't done it before down in Naples, and the replacement was very similar in terms of the engineering, which was the 33. Have you ever driven one of those, Mr. Quirk?
No, I've never driven any of the classic Alfas. I've always wanted to, and they've always stood out to me on films as well. I'm trying to think of some of the films because they were always used as police cars, if my memory serves.
That's absolutely correct. In the Italian films, in the 70s called giallo films, which were sort of police type films. The Alfa Giulia, normally the TIs were used as police cars. You see them everywhere, and then later the Alfettas. But a car that we would see on television, and we've talked about this actually on the channel before, is the GTV6 in Octopussy, which is an incredible car. The sound of that is astonishing. One of the first cars to receive the legendary Busso engine. The first was the Alfa 6 in 1979, designed by Giuseppe Busso, and used until about 2005, 2006 was the last Busso engined car, I believe, which was the 166, which we'll get onto in the second part. But just the sound of that car in that film is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's it. Alfa Romeo has always been one of those brands that enthusiasts have loved, even though they're not the most reliable and they've not got the best electricals, and that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. It's they've always been, it's like Top Gear and that drove them, and each one of them loves them, even though they know damn well they're going to break down 3 or 4 times in a show. But it doesn't detract from the fact that an Alfa Romeo offers you a beautiful driving experience.
It does.
And a tone that you can't beat.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just something about it. And, the original Alfa Spider from the late 60s, 66, I think that came out, lasted until 1993. I think they originally were killed off by Euro 1 emissions regulations. But the fact that car looked as good as it did all the way through a lot of the time. I mean, some people disagree with me, but I think personally the last series of them, which was, I believe, the Series 4, I could be wrong about this, which came in about 1990. I think that's still a lovely looking car, despite the fact that had been on sale since 66. I think that's an amazing achievement to be able to do that. And I'd like to drive one of those at some point. I do have other Alfas I've been offered, but the ones I've driven, like that 1971 GT Junior 1300 with a 2000 engine.
Fantastic.
Astonishing car.
And that wasn't even standard, was it? That had some extras, didn't it?
It's got a 2000 engine, so that's not standard. It's got different exhaust on it, different wheels, a bit of an animal. Like, you have to drive it properly, really drive it properly.
Yeah.
Very, very temperamental carb system on them, but driving position's not great. But if you can feel the road and everything going on so well. Yeah. The sound of the engine is astonishing. That's what Alfa has always been about. I mean, then you get into cars like the 90 and the 75, which were attempts to replace their sort of later models. The 90, of course, having appeared on my channel with Mr. Coleman and also on Furious Driving, is just a unique experience. There is one in the country which Mr. Coleman has, is on the road. There's others in storage, but just bonkers car. And it was bonkers era for Alfa Romeo in general, with the 164, which came a bit later, which really was a much more practical car on a joint floor pan with the Saab 9000, the Fiat
I was going to say there was always that relationship between Alfa Romeo and Saab, especially in certain models. They even had similar styling, shaping, and that makes sense due to the platform. But that's the thing. You're educating me in this because I only know so much about Alfa Romeo. And more so, like you say, I know it from, say, the 90s onwards, maybe even the late 90s onwards.
Yeah, I mean cars like the 75, of course, you would have seen, which had a similar transaxle with the inboard disc brakes and things to a 90 and an Alfeta. Those went into the 90s, but the 164 was much more conventionally engineered. I mean, the engines in those are the twin cam engine. Later,
well, when was it they started using boxer units?
The boxer unit was on the Alfa Sud in 72. Right. So that's what I
realised it was that early.
Yeah, it was. Because
that's such a distinct sound to me.
Yeah, I know. And then early 145s actually had the boxer units still out of the 33. So the 33s had the boxer units, and the early 145s, 146s had them too. I've always wanted to try a 164. I just think they're wonderful. Again, bonkers interior styling like an Alfa 90, but a much more practical car because the platform isn't really old, and front wheel drive, of course, too. I think the later ones for me look better than the earlier ones of the 164. And I have obviously driven the 166, but 164 was something I'd like to drive very much. I'm sure you'd like to drive a Cloverleaf as well, wouldn't you, Mr. Quirk? I'm sure that would be.
I'd like to drive any of these classics, to be honest. It'd be nice to get us to basically go to somewhere like a small racetrack and actually get to grips with these cars and see how they handled, because they were always renowned for being very good racing cars and things, but we've never had a chance to experience this.
It's a shame, isn't it? One Alfa you probably don't want to experience at all is the Alfa Romeo Arna, which was a bit of a disaster, wasn't it? That didn't go very well.
Yeah, but you're not a manufacturer unless you make a couple of disasters, are you?
No, not really.
Sad, but that's how you learn.
Yeah, exactly. So before 86, when Fiat took over, the Arna was this result of a tie-up between Nissan and Alfa Romeo, and they also made a Nissan version of the car called the Cherry Europe. And if you were going to build a car in conjunction with Nissan, what do you think, if you were Alfa Romeo, would be the bits that you want to give them?
Well, you've got to keep the heart of Alfa, haven't you? So you're not going to give them engines and gearboxes, are you?
Well, yeah. The Arna had an Alfa Sud engine and front suspension, electrics, in a Nissan Cherry body. The Cherry Europe was the one that had, the Alfa bits in it, along with the Arna. Well, that's
it. You've got Nissan reliability. So if you're going to
hope so, but
you haven't really, because it's Alfa Romeo's engine.
Yeah, I know.
But that's what I mean. That is a hard one, because if you're buying an Alfa, you want an Alfa that's got Alfa bits, but
it does, but it's got the styling of a Nissan Cherry.
Yeah, which I mean, I actually like the Cherry Turbo. I think it's not a bad looking car. I think it's quite a cool car.
Yeah.
But to put an Alfa Sud engine in, it seems a strange thing to do, to be honest, because you would want the reliability of Nissan's engine and the styling of Alfa Romeo rather than the way they did it, which was the styling of Nissan and the engine of Alfa.
So it's kind of the wrong way around. But this is
that's what I mean.
The first thing that Fiat did in '86, when they actually took on Alfa Romeo as well as everything else they owned at the time, including Lancia, was to get rid of the Alfa Rana, and of course the relationship with Nissan finished. So it was just a weird thing. They were doing weird cars like the Alfa 90, but was really a car in search of a market. It was soon killed off after the merger as well. So you then went into a bit more sort of conventional stuff for
That's
Alfa.
why Alfas. I've always realised I've always wondered why Alfas had the door handles on four-door cars in the thing, but was that taken from Nissan then?
I don't think so. No, not really.
Because Nissan have that as well. In most of their vehicles, they have their door handles hidden above the window line.
Yeah, I mean that's something I think for the sort of post 2000 cars, but at this time, it's not sort of quite that. But we're going now into stuff that I think you would recognise more. So the 33 was replaced by the 145, 146. The 75 was replaced by the 155, which of course you know from touring cars. And this is when we started to get cars that actually had Fiat bits in them. So
I was going to say that was one of the cars that I recognise. I always see one of those at Goodwood, you know, like a DTM style one, and it looks beautiful.
Yeah. I think the chap who used to race a 155 was Gabriele Tarquini. And you're quite an awesome thing in touring car racing in the mid 90s. You know, quite something. Up against sort of things like the Volvo 850 Estate and all that sort of stuff when it was a bit more weird.
But, now you're in my era of cars.
Yeah. And then you had other cars based on the same platform. So 145, 146, 155, and also the GTV. They were all based off a Fiat Tipo platform.
Yeah, that I still find that remarkable. When was it that twin spark technology was introduced into Alfa engines?
So the Alfa Romeo twin cam engine had come out in 1962, and that was in loads of things like, you know, the Spider, 105 Series Coupe.
Were they all twin sparks then?
No, they were just twin cam, but the twin spark technology was fitted to twin cam engines. But the later twin spark engine that's in your car is not the same engine. They stopped making that with the Alfa 164, I think, although I think some Alfa 164s have a twin spark engine, but the twin spark that you know is based on a Fiat block, and that's actually the one which is in yours. And those were supposed to replace the boxer units out of the 33 when the 145, 146 came on sale about 1993, 1994. But they weren't ready, so they had to make do with those box units for a bit. But later on in the 145, 146, as I went into in the review of the 145 that I did, that belongs to Mr. Richard Furious Driving, which is a really late one. It's a 2000, so it's even later than yours, but it's like a very late pre-facelift. This is a post facelift one, and as you know, having driven your brother's one a lot, the 145 2-litre Cloverleaf is an absolute animal.
Yeah.
You know, really strong performance, quite a loud car, but amazing steering. I've yet to experience.
Yeah, the weight of the steering is one thing that gets me.
Yeah.
Because that was it. When I was driving that, I was also driving my 16-valve Mark II Golf GTI at the same time. And the Golf had the edge on performance, but the weight of the Alfa and the tone of the engine and that exhaust made it just, it was just such a beautiful car, because it seems even on standard wheels to be very low.
Yeah, it's low. Yeah, really low.
Yeah, like lower than a 16-valve, which is 1 centimeter lower than an 8-valve. But this still looks stanced better, and it's such an interesting shape, the 145, isn't it?
Yeah. 145, I think, for me, looks better. 146, I don't think it's a bad-looking car. It's actually just
too rounded for me.
Yeah, it's a bit more practical. It's got the 5 doors and doesn't, you know, have the sort of weird parcel shelf arrangement thing that the low blind that the 145 has. But the dash is the same. But bizarrely, the facelifted cars, I think in '99 the facelift came, it only made them for a year. Facelifted cars in left-hand drive markets had a completely different dash from a right-hand drive ones, which is I don't know why. So when I drive Richard's car in a video that was about November 2019, I did that one. It was still the old dash that you still got in yours, which is really, really strange. You know, we still had Alfa around it.
Dash.
Sorry?
I like that dash. It reminds me more of like the old, as we were talking about, we touched on Fiesta dashes and the fact that it's recessed more for passenger. That's what the Alfa's like, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really sensible in terms of having, you know, like 2 people on the left-hand side of the car and a right-hand drive one. It's actually quite sensible, and you know they do have modern safety features in them. The only problem with all these cars on the platform, and apart from the Tipo itself, bizarrely, because they weren't that susceptible to rust, is that you know GTVs, 155s, 146s, 145, you know, all of them, they have really, really bad rust, and you know the cells particularly and the suspension mounts are just anywhere really for them. And this is why there are so few of these 90s Alfas left. There just aren't many left. And GTVs, amazingly, unless it's I think a Busso, they're not worth a lot of money. You know, you can pick one up famously as Classics World did. They picked up a GTV for £500.
Yeah, it's always it's astounded me how prices for Alfas seem to bottom out. I know it's like certain cars, because most of it is because you're going to be putting in 10, 15 grand of restoration money. But Alfas seem to be really low down. And there's no, I mean, they're not that much worse than, say, the Golf.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you take a Mark II Golf and you compare that with a 90s Alfa in terms of rust. I mean, the rust of them both of them is bad. They're both bad.
Extremely.
But for some reason, Volkswagens are worth a lot more. They're made in much larger numbers than the Alfas. And, you know.
Yeah, but that should, by logical thought, mean that they're worth less because there's more. And for some reason, Alfas are so rare and they're worth less, weirdly.
I know. As we went over in the video, did 145, there are about 150 145s left in this country on the road. The most common type is the cloverleaf, and you can understand why, because they're worth the most desirable ones. But all of them are just, there's hardly any left. You're just not likely to see one. So I suppose you're a bit like a museum custodian having that car in your garage, aren't you? Yeah. Right. Well, I think we've covered Alfa Romeo 1980 to 2000 quite well. We will be looking at things like the 166, 156, and you know, talking a bit more about the GTV and Spider in the next video, which will be on my channel. But for now, thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching.
Thank you.
And don't forget to subscribe to Planet Auto. For more updates on the 145 totally, this wonderful rare car, which at some point is planned to be put back on the road, isn't it?
Yes, that's the thing. We've had all this time, haven't we, in the last year, but it's made it harder to get other things as well. For example, mechanics, parts, things like that. Saying that, the Mercedes, it was easier to get things from Germany than it was from Euro, that's 10 miles away. I've never understood that. But yeah, the Alfa 145 is next in the list for restoration. The Mercedes has been done. The Golf is currently being done. And then it's the 145's turn.
I look forward to that, don't we?
Tell me about it.
Okay, right. Well, we'll see everybody over on my channel for part two.
Thank you for joining us. And yeah, we hope that you've enjoyed the Alfa Romeo talk. And as Joseph said, we'll be there literally momentarily. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.